Victor Sterling was the kind of billionaire who believed only in what he could see, measure, and control. At 55 years old, he had built a technology empire worth $8 billion by trusting logic, science, and cold hard facts. He had no patience for faith, religion, or what he called fairy tales for weak minds. When a humble cleaning lady at his company mentioned something about prayer during their conversation, Victor exploded with cruel mockery. In front of his office full of employees, he made a challenge that shocked everyone present. "Prove God exists, and I'll pay you $1 million, he sneered at the woman. "But when nothing happens, I want you to admit that religion is just nonsense for desperate people." The cleaning lady said nothing at first, but what she was about to do would shake Victor's entire worldview and force him to question everything he thought he knew about faith, miracles, and the power of believing in something greater than yourself. If you're someone who appreciates emotional stories, we'd love for you to like and subscribe. There's more to come that might move you too. The 42nd floor of Sterling Tech Tower in downtown Chicago was busy even at 9:30 at night. Victor Sterling, the company's boss, was still in his office. This was normal for him. What wasn't normal was talking to Mary Johnson, the cleaning lady. Mary had worked at Sterling Tech for 12 years. She was a quiet woman in her 50s. She had kind eyes and rough hands from years of hard work. She had 3 kids and lived in a small apartment on the south side of the city. Every night, she cleaned the offices of rich and powerful people, but most of them never really saw her. Victor had never paid attention to Mary before tonight. She was just part of the cleaning crew. But something had happened in Victor's life that made him notice things he usually ignored. 3 weeks ago, Victor's 8-year-old son Tommy was in a bad car accident. The boy was now in a coma at Chicago Memorial Hospital. The doctors said his brain was badly hurt. They couldn't promise he would ever wake up. Victor spent his days running his company. He spent his nights sitting next to Tommy's bed, watching machines keep his son alive. The accident happened on a rainy Thursday evening. Victor was supposed to pick up Tommy from soccer practice, but he had an important business meeting that ran late, so he sent his driver, James, instead. On the way back to Victor's mansion, a drunk driver ran a red light and crashed into their car. James died instantly. Tommy survived, but barely. For 3 weeks now, Victor had been living in hell. Every morning, he woke up hoping the doctors would call with good news. Every evening, he sat next to Tommy's bed, holding his small hand, begging him to squeeze back. But Tommy never moved. He just lay there, breathing with the help of machines, lost somewhere far away. Tonight, Victor came back to the office after another sad visit to the hospital. He was angry and tired. He wanted someone to blame for his pain. That's when he saw Mary cleaning his office. Something about how calm she looked made him mad. "You look pretty happy for someone who works all night," Victor said in a mean voice as Mary cleaned his desk. Mary looked up. She was surprised he was talking to her. In 12 years, Victor Sterling had barely said hello to her. "I try to stay positive, Mr. Sterling," she said quietly. "Positive?" Victor laughed, but there was no joy in it. "That's funny. My son is dying in a hospital, and you're talking about staying positive. Tell me, Mary, what makes you so happy?" Mary stopped cleaning and looked at Victor carefully. She could see the pain in his eyes, even though he was trying to hide it with anger. She had heard about his son's accident from other workers. The whole company had been talking about it. Her heart hurt for this rich man who seemed so lost. "I'm not happy about your pain, Mr. Sterling," Mary said softly. "I'm sorry about what happened to Tommy, but I try to find hope even in dark times." "Hope?" Victor's voice got sharper. "Hope in what? Hope that some miracle is going to save my son? Hope that everything will magically get better?" "I pray, Mr. Sterling," she said simply. "Every day, I pray for strength, for my family, and I've been praying for your son too." Victor's face changed right away. Hearing about prayer made something dark wake up inside him. All the anger, fear, and sadness he had been feeling for weeks suddenly had a target. "Prayer?" he said, his voice getting louder. "You've been praying for my son?" Other people working late started to notice what was happening. A few office workers and security guards began gathering near Victor's office door. The glass walls of Victor's corner office meant everyone could see what was going on. "Yes, sir," Mary said. She didn't understand why he seemed so upset. "I pray for all families who are hurting." Victor stood up from his chair. His face was red with anger. "Let me tell you something about prayer, Mary. It's complete garbage. It's what weak people do when they can't handle the truth. My son is fighting for his life because of doctors and medicine, not because you're talking to some invisible friend in the sky." Mary stepped back a little, but she didn't look scared. She looked sad for him. "Mr. Sterling, I understand you're hurting. When my husband died 5 years ago, I felt angry too. I questioned everything. But prayer helped me. Don't you dare compare your situation to mine," Victor shouted. Now everyone on the floor could hear him. You want to know what I think about your prayers? They're useless. They're for people who are too stupid to understand that life is random and cruel, and no amount of begging some made-up God is going to change that. The office had gone completely quiet. People stopped typing on their computers. Security guards looked uncomfortable, but Mary didn't run away or start crying like Victor expected. Instead, she looked him straight in the eyes. I'm sorry you feel that way, Mr. Sterling, she said softly. Sorry? Victor was getting more angry by the second. You know what? I'm going to prove to you and everyone else here how worthless prayer really is. I'm going to make you a deal, Mary. He walked around his desk until he was standing right in front of her. The crowd of employees got bigger. Some people were recording with their phones. Others were calling their friends to come watch. Victor's assistant, Janet, tried to step forward. Mr. Sterling, maybe we should… Stay out of this, Janet, Victor snapped. He turned back to Mary. I'll give you $1 million, Victor said loudly. $1 million if you can prove that God exists. But here's the catch. When nothing happens, when your prayers fail like they always do, I want you to stand in front of all these people and admit that religion is just made-up stories for desperate people. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Mary looked around at all the faces watching her. Some looked shocked, others looked excited to see what would happen. A few looked embarrassed for their boss. One of the security guards, an older man named Bob, shook his head sadly. He had seen Victor change over the past 3 weeks. The man used to be tough but fair. Now he was just angry all the time. $1 million, Mary, Victor repeated. All you have to do is prove that your God is real. Shouldn't be hard, right? If he's really there, if he really cares about sick children, then he should be able to do something obvious. Something we can all see. Mary was quiet for a long moment. She looked down at her cleaning supplies, then back up at Victor. Around them, more people had gathered. Word was spreading through the building fast. Someone had already started streaming the conversation live on social media. What would you consider proof, Mr. Sterling? She asked calmly. Victor smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. Oh, that's easy. You say God hears prayers, right? You say he can perform miracles? Then pray for my son. Pray for Tommy to wake up from his coma. The doctors say it's impossible. His brain activity is almost zero. If your God is real, he should be able to wake up one little boy, shouldn't he? The crowd of employees looked back and forth between Victor and Mary like they were watching a tennis match. Some people had their phones out, streaming the whole thing live on social media. The hashtag #prayer challenge was already starting to trend on Twitter. And if Tommy doesn't wake up? Mary asked. Then you admit in front of everyone that prayer is fake, that God is fake, that you've been wasting your time and giving people false hope. Victor's voice was cold and cruel. Deal? Mary thought about her own children at home. Her daughter Sarah was in college, working 2 jobs to pay for school. Her son Michael was in high school, dreaming of becoming a doctor. Her youngest, Lisa, was only 10 and still believed in magic and miracles. What would they think if they saw their mother on the news, being humiliated by a billionaire? What would happen to her job if she failed? Mary needed this job. She had worked here for 12 years, and the health insurance covered her family. But then she thought about Tommy Sterling, a little boy she had never met, lying alone in a hospital bed. She thought about his father, this angry, broken man in front of her, who was lashing out because he was scared of losing his child. Mary had lost people too. Her husband Robert died of cancer 5 years ago. She knew what it felt like to watch someone you love slip away, to feel helpless and angry at the world. She remembered the nights she spent crying in her car after visiting Robert in the hospital, asking God why good people had to suffer. But she also remembered the peace that came after the storm, the strength she found to keep going, the way her church family supported her and her children, the small miracles that happened every day, her kids staying healthy, finding this job when they needed money most, the friends who showed up when she needed them. Mary looked around the room one more time. She saw the faces of people she had worked with for years. She saw the security cameras recording everything. She knew that by tomorrow, this whole conversation would probably be on the news. But she also saw something else. In Victor's eyes, behind all the anger and cruelty, she saw fear. She saw a father who was terrified of losing his son. She saw a man who had built his whole life on control and logic, and now faced something he couldn't control or understand. Mary picked up her cleaning supplies and put them in her cart. I accept your challenge, Mr. Sterling, she said quietly. The room exploded with whispers and gasps. Victor looked surprised. He had expected her to back down, to make excuses, to run away. You accept? He stammered. Yes, Mary said. But I have one condition. What condition? Mary looked him straight in the eyes. I want to pray next to your son's bed. At the hospital. Tonight. Victor's confidence flickered for just a second, but then came back stronger. Fine. We'll go right now. But when nothing happens, Mary, when your prayers fail, I want you to remember that you chose this. You chose to embarrass yourself in front of everyone. He turned to his assistant. Janet, call the hospital. Tell them I'm coming with a guest, and call my lawyer. I want this whole thing documented properly. As Mary pushed her cleaning cart toward the elevator, she whispered something so quietly that only Victor could hear it. I'll pray for you too, Mr. Sterling. The elevator doors closed, and the most powerful man in Chicago found himself wondering if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The ride to Chicago Memorial Hospital was the longest 20 minutes of Mary's life. She sat in the back of Victor's black Mercedes, watching the city lights blur past the window. Victor sat next to her, typing furiously on his phone, probably dealing with the mess they had left behind at the office. The driver, a quiet man named David, kept glancing at them in the rearview mirror. He had worked for Victor for 8 years and had never seen his boss bring a cleaning lady anywhere, especially not to visit his son. Mary's hands were shaking a little, not because she was scared of Victor, but because she was thinking about what she had just agreed to do. $1 million, more money than she had ever dreamed of, but also the chance of complete humiliation if nothing happened. She thought about calling her children to tell them what was happening, but what would she say? Hi kids, I just challenged a billionaire to prove God exists, and now I'm going to pray over his son? They would think she had lost her mind. Second thoughts? Victor asked without looking up from his phone. No, sir, Mary replied calmly. Good, because there's no backing out now. Half the internet already knows about our little bet. Victor showed her his phone screen. The video of their confrontation was already going viral. Prayer challenge was trending nationwide. People are taking sides, Victor continued with a cold smile. Some are calling you brave, others are calling you foolish. Most are just excited to watch you fail. Mary looked at the comments scrolling past. Some people were supporting her, saying they would pray too. Others were making fun of her, calling her crazy for thinking she could win against a billionaire. A few were even making bets on whether the boy would wake up. Does it bother you that people are treating your son's condition like entertainment? Mary asked softly. Victor's typing stopped. For a moment his confident mask slipped, and Mary saw the pain underneath. Everything about this situation bothers me, he said quietly. Then his voice got hard again. But at least when you fail, maybe some people will stop believing in false hope. They pulled into the hospital parking garage. Victor had called ahead, so security was waiting for them. As they walked through the lobby, Mary noticed people recognizing Victor and whispering to each other. A few even pulled out their phones to take pictures. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Tommy's main doctor, was waiting by the elevator. She was a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and graying hair. She had been treating Tommy since the night of the accident. Mr. Sterling, she said with a professional smile. I got your call, though I have to say, I'm not sure this is a good idea. Why not? Victor asked. You've told me 100 times that Tommy's condition is hopeless, that there's nothing more you can do. So what harm could it cause to let Mary here say a few words? Dr. Mitchell looked at Mary with curiosity. You're the cleaning lady from the office? Yes, ma'am, Mary replied. And you really think you can help Tommy by praying? Mary chose her words carefully. I think prayer can do things that medicine sometimes can't. But I also respect what you and the other doctors have done for Tommy. You've kept him alive. That's a miracle too. Dr. Mitchell seemed surprised by Mary's answer. She had expected someone more aggressive, more claiming to have magical powers. Well, the doctor said, I've seen a lot of things in 30 years of medicine. Some I can explain, some I can't. But I have to warn you both. Tommy's condition is very serious. His brain activity has been minimal for weeks. Even if he were to wake up, which is extremely unlikely, there could be significant brain damage. We understand, Victor said quickly. This isn't about medical expectations. This is about proving a point. They rode the elevator to the pediatric intensive care unit in silence. The hallway was quiet, except for the sound of their footsteps and the distant beeping of machines. Mary had never been in a children's hospital before. The colorful decorations on the walls, meant to make kids feel better, somehow made everything seem sadder. Room 314 was at the end of the hall. Through the glass window, Mary could see a small figure lying in the bed, surrounded by machines and tubes. Victor stopped walking. I should prepare you, he said, his voice different now. Tommy doesn't look like a normal sleeping child. The machines, they're breathing for him, feeding him. His face it's not the same as before the accident. Mary put her hand gently on Victor's arm. Are you okay to go in? Victor pulled away from her touch. I've been coming here every night for 3 weeks. I'm fine. But as they entered the room, Mary could see that Victor was not fine at all. His hands were shaking as he approached the bed. His breathing became shallow. This powerful man who controlled billion-dollar companies looked completely helpless next to his son's bed. Tommy Sterling was small for 8 years old. He had his father's dark hair but a gentler face. Tubes were connected to his mouth and nose, helping him breathe. Wires attached to his chest monitored his heart. An IV drip fed him nutrients. The only sounds were the steady beep of heart monitors and the whoosh of the breathing machine. "Hello, Tommy," Mary whispered, even though she knew he couldn't hear her. Victor sat down in the chair next to the bed, the same chair he had been sitting in every night for weeks. "Go ahead," he said bitterly. "Do your miracle. Show me the power of your God." Mary moved closer to the bed. She looked down at Tommy's peaceful face and felt her heart break a little. This was somebody's baby. This was a little boy who should be playing soccer, doing homework, arguing with his parents about bedtime. "Can I touch his hand?" Mary asked. Victor nodded. Mary gently took Tommy's small hand in hers. It was warm but completely limp. She closed her eyes and began to pray silently. But Victor wasn't having any of that. "Oh no," he said loudly. "If you're going to do this, do it out loud. I want to hear every word. I want Dr. Mitchell to hear it. I want the security cameras to record it. No silent prayers that you can later claim worked in mysterious ways." Mary opened her eyes and looked at Victor. "You want me to pray out loud?" "Absolutely. That was part of the deal. Prove that God exists. Let everyone hear you ask him to wake up my son, and when nothing happens, we'll all know the truth." Dr. Mitchell stood near the door, looking uncomfortable. A nurse had joined her, curious about what was happening. Word was spreading through the hospital that the billionaire Victor Sterling was upstairs with a cleaning lady who claimed she could wake up his son through prayer. Mary looked around the room, at Victor, angry and desperate, at Dr. Mitchell, professional but skeptical, at the nurse, wide-eyed with curiosity, at the security camera in the corner, recording everything. Then she looked back down at Tommy, so small and still in the big hospital bed. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll pray out loud." Mary took a deep breath and began to speak. Her voice was quiet but clear, filled with a faith that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. "Dear God," she said, "I'm here with Tommy Sterling, a little boy who needs your help. His father Victor is here too, and he's hurting so much. They both need a miracle tonight." Victor rolled his eyes, but he was listening to every word. "God, I know you see Tommy lying here. I know you see his father's pain. I know you see all of us who feel helpless right now. The doctors have done everything they can with their knowledge and skill. But you can do things that doctors can't." Mary's voice got a little stronger. "If it's your will, please bring Tommy back to us. Let him open his eyes. Let him speak. Let him hug his father again. But if that's not your plan, then please give Victor the strength to handle whatever comes next." Victor was about to make a sarcastic comment when Mary said something that stopped him cold. "And God, please forgive Victor for his anger. He's not really mad at you. He's just scared. He loves his son so much and he doesn't know how to help him. Show him that even when we can't understand your ways, you're still there with us in our darkest moments." The room was completely quiet except for the sound of the machines. Mary continued to hold Tommy's hand, still praying silently now, her lips moving without sound. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Victor kept checking his watch, getting more impatient and more confident that nothing was going to happen. "How long is this going to take?" he finally asked. "Faith doesn't work on your schedule, Mr. Sterling," Mary replied without opening her eyes. "Faith doesn't work at all," Victor shot back. "You've been holding my son's hand for 15 minutes, and he's exactly the same as he was when we walked in here." Dr. Mitchell was checking Tommy's monitors. Nothing had changed. His brain activity was still minimal. His breathing was still being controlled by the machine. His heart rate was steady but showed no signs of consciousness. "Maybe we should," the doctor started to say. Suddenly, Mary's eyes opened wide. She was staring down at Tommy's face with an expression of complete shock. "What?" Victor demanded. "What is it?" Mary's voice was barely a whisper. "Did you see that?" "See what?" Victor jumped up from his chair. His eyelid. It moved. Victor looked down at his son's face. Tommy looked exactly the same as he had for the past 3 weeks. "I don't see anything." "It was just a little flutter," Mary insisted, like he was trying to wake up. Dr. Mitchell moved closer to the bed and examined Tommy carefully. She checked his eyes with a small flashlight. She looked at all the monitors. Everything was the same. "Mrs. Johnson," she said gently, "sometimes when we want something very badly, we think we see things that aren't really there. Tommy's condition hasn't changed." Victor's confidence came flooding back. "Of course it hasn't changed. Because prayer doesn't work. Because God doesn't exist. Because this whole thing is exactly what I said it was. A waste of time." But Mary wasn't giving up. She kept holding Tommy's hand, kept looking at his face with intense concentration. "Please, God," she whispered. "Please show them. Please help this little boy." The minutes ticked by. 20 minutes, 25, 30. Nothing happened. Victor finally stood up. "That's enough. We're done here. You've had your chance, Mary, and your God has failed to show up, just like I knew he would." But just as Victor was about to tell Mary that she had lost the bet, something happened that would change everything. Tommy's fingers moved. Tommy's fingers moved. Just a tiny twitch, barely visible, but Mary felt it. She was still holding his hand when his small fingers pressed against her palm for just a second. "His fingers!" Mary said excitedly. "They moved!" Victor spun around. "What are you talking about?" "He squeezed my hand. Tommy squeezed my hand." Dr. Mitchell immediately moved to the bed and began checking Tommy's vital signs. Victor pushed past Mary to get closer to his son. "I don't see anything," Victor said, staring down at Tommy's still face. "He looks exactly the same." "But I felt it," Mary insisted. "His fingers pressed against mine. It was gentle, but it was real." Dr. Mitchell was studying the monitors carefully. "His heart rate did spike slightly about 30 seconds ago," she admitted, "but that could be normal variation. Coma patients sometimes have small changes in their vital signs." "See," Victor said, his voice getting louder. "Even the doctor says it's normal. You're imagining things because you want to win the bet." But Mary wasn't paying attention to Victor anymore. She was focused completely on Tommy. She kept holding his hand, watching his face for any other signs of movement. "Tommy," she said softly. "Tommy, can you hear me? If you can hear me, squeeze my hand again." Everyone in the room held their breath. 5 seconds passed. 10 seconds. Nothing happened. Victor laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Tommy, if you can hear the nice lady, squeeze her hand," he said in a mocking voice. "Come on, son. Don't let Daddy down. Show us a miracle." "Mr. Sterling, please," Dr. Mitchell said. "Even if there were signs of consciousness, talking to him like that isn't helpful." "Nothing is helpful," Victor exploded. "Don't you understand? I've tried everything. I've hired the best doctors in the world. I've paid for experimental treatments. I've moved heaven and earth to save my son, and nothing has worked. Nothing." His voice cracked on the last word. 3 weeks of held-back emotion were finally breaking through his angry exterior. "I've sat in this chair every single night," Victor continued, tears starting to form in his eyes. "I've talked to him, played his favorite music, brought his favorite toys. I've begged him to wake up. I've promised him anything he wants if he'll just open his eyes. And nothing has worked." Mary watched Victor fall apart and felt her heart break for him. This wasn't really about proving God exists. This was about a father who was out of options and desperate to save his child. "Mr. Sterling," Mary said gently, "maybe Tommy has been waiting for—" "Waiting for what?" Victor interrupted. "Waiting for a cleaning lady to pray over him? Waiting for some magical words that his own father couldn't provide? Maybe he's been waiting for you to have faith." Victor stared at Mary like she had just slapped him. "Faith? Faith in what? Faith in a God who lets 8-year-old children get hit by drunk drivers? Faith in a God who takes away innocent kids while evil people live long, healthy lives? Faith that you're not alone in this," Mary replied. "Faith that love is stronger than fear. Faith that Tommy can feel how much you care about him, even if he can't show it." Dr. Mitchell was still monitoring Tommy's vital signs. She noticed something interesting, but wasn't sure if she should mention it. "His brain activity is slightly different than usual," she said slowly. Victor's head snapped toward her. "Different how?" "It's still very low, but there are small patterns I haven't seen before. It could be nothing, but—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But it's the most activity we've recorded since the accident." The room went completely silent. Even the nurses in the hallway seemed to stop making noise. The only sounds were the beeping monitors and the breathing machine. Mary closed her eyes and squeezed Tommy's hand a little tighter. "God," she prayed out loud, "if you're going to do something, please do it now. This family needs to see your love. Victor needs to believe that miracles are real." Victor wanted to interrupt her prayer, to tell her to stop wasting everyone's time, but something made him stay quiet. Maybe it was the way Mary's voice sounded so sure, so peaceful. Maybe it was the way Dr. Mitchell was staring at the monitors with a confused expression. Or maybe it was the way Tommy's eyelids were starting to flutter. This time, everyone saw it. Tommy's eyes were moving behind his closed eyelids, like he was dreaming. His head turned slightly to the left, then back to center. "Oh my God," whispered the nurse standing by the door. Dr. Mitchell immediately started checking Tommy more thoroughly. She lifted his eyelids and shined a light into his eyes. She tested his reflexes. She listened to his heartbeat. "This is unusual," she said. trying to stay professional even though her hands were shaking with excitement. "What's unusual?" Victor demanded. "What's happening to my son? His pupils are responding to light. His reflexes are stronger. His brain activity is increasing by the minute." Victor looked back and forth between the doctor and his son, not daring to hope. "What does that mean?" "It means Tommy might be waking up." The words hung in the air like magic. Victor grabbed Tommy's other hand and leaned down close to his son's face. "Tommy? Tommy, it's Daddy. Can you hear me?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then Tommy's lips moved slightly like he was trying to say something. Mary felt tears running down her cheeks. "Thank you, God," she whispered. But Victor wasn't ready to give credit to God yet. "It could be a coincidence," he said, even though his voice was shaking with hope. "People sometimes wake up from comas naturally. It doesn't prove anything about prayer." Tommy's eyes opened. Not all the way, just a little bit, but they opened. For the first time in 3 weeks, Tommy Sterling's eyes were open. Dr. Mitchell immediately called for more nurses and doctors. Within minutes, the room was full of medical staff, all amazed by what they were seeing. "Tommy," Victor said, his voice barely a whisper. "Tommy, can you see me?" Tommy's eyes moved slowly toward his father's voice. They were unfocused and confused, but they were open. He tried to speak, but the breathing tube in his throat made it impossible. "We need to remove the breathing tube," Dr. Mitchell said. "But we have to be very careful. He's been dependent on the ventilator for weeks." As the medical team worked to safely remove Tommy's breathing tube, Victor held his son's hand and cried. For the first time since the accident, he was crying tears of joy instead of sadness. Mary stood back and watched the reunion between father and son. She felt incredibly grateful, but also a little scared. She knew that Victor would want an explanation for what had happened, and she wasn't sure he was ready to accept the truth. When the breathing tube was finally removed, Tommy took his first independent breath in 3 weeks. It was shaky and weak, but it was his own. "Daddy," Tommy whispered, his voice rough and barely audible. Victor broke down completely. He hugged his son gently, careful not to disturb the other medical equipment. "I'm here, buddy. Daddy's here. You're going to be okay." Tommy looked around the room with confused eyes. He saw all the doctors and nurses. He saw the machines and wires. Then his eyes found Mary, still standing quietly in the corner. "Who's the nice lady?" Tommy asked weakly. Victor looked back at Mary, and for the first time all night, he didn't know what to say. Dr. Mitchell was amazed by how quickly Tommy was becoming alert. In her 30 years of medicine, she had never seen someone emerge from a coma so completely and so fast. "Tommy," she said gently, "I'm Dr. Mitchell. You've been sleeping for a long time. How do you feel?" "Tired," Tommy replied, "and confused. I had the strangest dream." "What kind of dream?" Victor asked. Tommy's young face scrunched up as he tried to remember. "There was a bright light, and a voice telling me it was time to wake up. The voice said Daddy needed me, and that a nice lady was praying for us." Everyone in the room looked at Mary. She felt her cheeks getting red from all the attention. "The voice said I should tell Daddy that he's not alone," Tommy continued, "and that love is stronger than being scared." Those were almost the exact words Mary had said to Victor earlier in the evening. Victor stared at his son, then at Mary, then back at his son. His world of logic and science was crumbling around him. Everything he thought he knew about reality was being challenged by an 8-year-old boy who had just woken up from an impossible coma. "Tommy," Victor said carefully, "do you remember the accident?" Tommy nodded slightly. "I remember the car spinning. I remember James screaming. Then everything went dark until the light came." "What else do you remember about the light?" "It was warm and safe. The voice said that sometimes miracles happen when people really believe in them. The voice said that the nice lady's prayers were heard." Dr. Mitchell was taking notes frantically. She had never heard a coma patient describe their experience in such detail, especially not a child. Victor looked at Mary with an expression she couldn't quite read. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't mockery. It was something closer to fear. "Mary," he said slowly, "what exactly did you pray for?" Mary thought about her prayer from earlier in the evening. She had asked for Tommy to wake up, but she had also asked for Victor to find faith. "I prayed for Tommy to come back to you," she said simply, "and I prayed for you to see that you're not alone in this world." Tommy smiled weakly at Mary. "Thank you for praying for me, nice lady." The voice said your prayers were beautiful. As the medical team continued to run tests on Tommy, Victor found himself facing the biggest question of his life. Had he just witnessed a miracle? Or was this an incredible coincidence that medical science could explain? Either way, he knew one thing for certain. He owed Mary Johnson $1 million. But more importantly, he owed her an apology. The next few hours were the strangest of Victor Sterling's life. Tommy was awake, talking, and getting stronger by the hour. The medical team was amazed. Dr. Mitchell kept saying she had never seen anything like it. But Victor couldn't stop thinking about what his son had said about the voice and the light. By 6 in the morning, word had spread throughout the hospital. Nurses and doctors who weren't even working on Tommy's case kept finding excuses to walk past his room. Everyone wanted to see the miracle boy who had woken up from an impossible coma. Mary had been sitting quietly in the corner all night, watching the reunion between father and son. She felt happy and grateful, but also tired. She hadn't slept, and she still had to go home to her own family and explain what had happened. Tommy was now sitting up in bed, eating his first real food in 3 weeks. Just Jell-O and crackers. But to Victor, it looked like the most beautiful meal in the world. "Daddy," Tommy said between small bites, "why does everyone look so surprised that I'm awake?" Victor didn't know how to explain to his 8-year-old son that he had been in a coma for 3 weeks, that the doctors thought he might never wake up, that his father had almost lost all hope. "You were sleeping very deeply, buddy," Victor said carefully. "We weren't sure when you would wake up. But I told you the voice said it was time," Tommy replied, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Dr. Mitchell had been running tests all morning. She pulled Victor aside to talk privately. "Mr. Sterling," she said, "I need to be honest with you. What happened here last night goes against everything I learned in medical school. Tommy's brain scans from yesterday showed almost no activity. Today, they're completely normal." "So you can't explain it?" Victor asked. "Not with current medical knowledge, no. His recovery is not just unusual, it's unprecedented. I've already contacted several colleagues at other hospitals. No one has ever seen a coma patient wake up this quickly, or this completely." Victor looked through the window at his son, who was now asking a nurse if he could have more crackers. "What are you saying, doctor?" "I'm saying that, from a medical perspective, Tommy's recovery appears to be miraculous." There was that word again, miracle. Victor had spent his entire adult life believing that miracles were impossible, that everything in the universe could be explained by science and logic. But here was a doctor, a scientist, telling him that his son's recovery couldn't be explained. Victor walked back into Tommy's room, where Mary was now sitting next to the bed, reading Tommy a story from a children's book that one of the nurses had brought. "Mary," Victor said, "can I talk to you outside?" They stepped into the hallway, leaving Tommy with the nurses. Victor looked exhausted. His expensive suit was wrinkled from sleeping in the hospital chair. His usually perfect hair was messy, but his eyes were different than they had been the night before. The anger was gone. "I owe you an apology," Victor said quietly. Mary looked surprised. "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Sterling." "Yes, I do. I was cruel to you last night. I was angry and desperate, and I took it out on you. That wasn't right. You were scared for your son," Mary replied. "Any parent would have been angry in your situation. But not every parent would have mocked someone who was trying to help," Victor said. "Not every parent would have made a bet out of their child's suffering." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the busy hospital hallway. Doctors and nurses rushed past them, dealing with other emergencies, other families in crisis. "Mary," Victor said finally, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Okay. Do you really believe that your prayer caused Tommy to wake up?" Mary thought carefully before answering. "I believe that prayer is powerful. I believe that God hears us when we ask for help. But I also believe that sometimes God works through doctors and medicine and the love of family members." "That's not really an answer," Victor said. "Mr. Sterling, you want me to say either yes or no. Either God did this, or he didn't. But maybe the real miracle isn't just that Tommy woke up. Maybe the real miracle is that you're asking these questions." Victor frowned. "What do you mean? Yesterday you were so sure that God didn't exist. You were so angry at the idea of faith. But now you're asking me if prayer works. That's a big change." "I'm asking because I don't understand what happened. I need logical explanations for things." "And what if there isn't a logical explanation?" Mary asked gently. "What if some things in life are bigger than logic?" Before Victor could answer, Tommy called out from his room. "Daddy, come here. I want to show you something." They went back into the room, where Tommy was sitting up excitedly in bed. "Watch this," Tommy said. He closed his eyes and was quiet for a moment. Then he opened them and smiled. "I asked the voice to help me remember something, and it worked. I remember the day before the accident. We were going to build that treehouse in the backyard, remember?" Victor's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, buddy. We were going to build it together. Can we still build it when I go home?" Tommy asked. "Absolutely. We'll build the biggest, best treehouse in Chicago." Tommy clapped his hands happily. Then he looked at Mary. "Miss Mary, the voice told me something else. It said I should tell Daddy that love is the only thing that's really real. Everything else is just stuff that happens." Mary felt chills run down her arms. She had never said those words to Tommy. She had never even thought them. But somehow, This little boy was sharing wisdom that seemed to come from somewhere beyond his 8-year-old understanding. Victor sat down heavily in his chair. Everything he thought he knew about the world was being challenged by his own son. "Tommy," Victor said carefully, "when you talk about the voice, what did it sound like?" "Like the kindest person in the world," Tommy replied. "Like someone who loves everyone, even people who do bad things. Like someone who understands why people are scared and angry but isn't scared or angry back." "Did the voice tell you anything else?" Tommy nodded. "It said that miracles happen every day, but most people are too busy to notice them. It said that Daddy has been getting miracles his whole life, but he thought they were just luck." Victor thought about his life, his successful business, his beautiful son, his health and wealth. Had those things really been luck? Or had he been blessed in ways he never recognized? "The voice also said," Tommy continued, "that Miss Mary is very special, that she talks to God every day, and God listens to her because she has a pure heart." Mary blushed and looked down at her hands. "Tommy, I'm not special. I'm just a regular person who believes in prayer. That's what makes you special," Tommy said with the simple wisdom that only children possess. "Dr. Mitchell came back into the room with Tommy's latest test results. "Mr. Sterling," she said, "I have good news. All of Tommy's tests are normal. His brain function is perfect. His motor skills are fine. If he continues to improve at this rate, he could go home in a few days." Home? Victor couldn't believe it. Yesterday, he thought his son might never wake up. Now he was talking about going home. "There will need to be some follow-up care," Dr. Mitchell continued. "Physical therapy, some monitoring. But yes, Tommy appears to be making a complete recovery." As the doctor left, Victor realized that he still had a promise to keep. He had made a bet with Mary, and she had won. Whether he understood how or why, Tommy had woken up after she prayed for him. "Mary," Victor said, "about our agreement last night." "Oh, Mr. Sterling, you don't need to worry about that," Mary said quickly. "I wasn't really doing it for the money. I just wanted to help Tommy." "But a deal is a deal," Victor insisted. "I promised you $1 million if you could prove God exists. And whether I understand it or not, something impossible happened after you prayed." Mary looked uncomfortable. "I don't need $1 million, Mr. Sterling. I'm happy that Tommy is okay. That's enough for me." But Victor was already pulling out his phone. "No, Mary. You kept your part of the bargain. Now I need to keep mine." As Victor made calls to his bank and his lawyer to arrange the money transfer, Mary sat with Tommy, who was getting sleepy again. This time, though, it was normal sleep, not the terrible darkness of a coma. "Miss Mary," Tommy said drowsily, "will you come visit me when I go home?" "If your daddy says it's okay," Mary replied. Tommy looked at his father, who was still on the phone with the bank. "Daddy, can Miss Mary come visit us? She's my friend now." Victor looked at Mary, this quiet, humble woman who had somehow brought his son back to him. Whether through prayer, coincidence, or something he couldn't understand, she had given him the greatest gift of his life. "Mary," Victor said, "you're welcome in our home anytime. In fact, I'd like you to consider making some changes in your life." "What kind of changes?" Mary asked. "I'd like to offer you a job. Not cleaning offices, but something better. I want to start a foundation, a charity that helps families going through medical crises, and I want you to help me run it." Mary was speechless. A few hours ago, she was just a cleaning lady. Now, a billionaire was offering her $1 million and a new career. I don't know what to say," she stammered. Tommy smiled sleepily. "The voice told me Daddy would want you to stay and help more people. It said that's why this whole thing happened." Victor stared at his son. Even drowsy and tired, Tommy seemed to understand things that Victor was still struggling with. As Tommy drifted off to sleep, real, peaceful sleep, Victor found himself doing something he hadn't done in 20 years. He prayed, not out loud, and not with fancy words. Just a simple, quiet thought directed toward whatever power had brought his son back to him. "Thank you," he whispered. And for the first time in his life, Victor Sterling felt like someone was listening. 3 months later, Victor Sterling stood in front of the largest conference room at Sterling Tech Tower. But this wasn't a business meeting. Today, he was announcing the launch of the Sterling Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping families facing medical crises. The room was packed with reporters, employees, and community leaders. But the two most important people to Victor were sitting in the front row. Tommy, who was now completely healthy and back in school, and Mary Johnson, who was wearing a beautiful new dress instead of her old cleaning uniform. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor began, "3 months ago, I was a different man. I believed only in what I could see and measure. I thought faith was for weak people who couldn't handle reality. I was wrong about many things, but I was especially wrong about the power of hope and prayer." The audience was completely quiet. Everyone knew the story of Tommy's miraculous recovery, But this was the first time Victor had spoken publicly about what happened that night. My son Tommy was in a coma for 3 weeks. The doctors told me there was very little hope. I was angry, desperate, and losing faith in everything good in the world. That's when I met Mary Johnson. Victor looked at Mary, who smiled encouragingly at him. Mary was a cleaning lady at my company. When she told me she was praying for my son, I mocked her. I challenged her to prove God exists, promising her $1 million if she could do the impossible. Wake up my son through prayer. Tommy waved at the crowd from his seat. He loved being part of his father's speeches now. What happened that night changed my life forever, Victor continued. Mary prayed for Tommy, and he woke up. Not gradually, not partially, but completely. The doctors called it medically impossible, but Mary just called it answered prayer. The reporters were writing frantically, capturing every word. I kept my promise to Mary. I gave her the $1 million, but she did something that surprised me even more than her successful prayer. She donated most of the money to the children's hospital where Tommy was treated. She kept only enough to pay for her daughter's college tuition and some repairs on her home. The audience murmured appreciatively. Mary's humility had been covered extensively in the media over the past few months. That's when I realized that Mary wasn't just someone who believed in miracles. She was someone who created them through her kindness and generosity. So I asked her to help me start the Sterling Foundation. Mary stood up and joined Victor at the podium. Over the past 3 months, she had learned to speak in front of groups, though she was still nervous. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," Mary said in her gentle voice. "When I prayed for Tommy that night, I wasn't thinking about money or fame or proving anything to anyone. I was just thinking about a little boy who needed help and a father who was hurting." The crowd listened intently. Mary had become something of a local celebrity, but she had remained the same humble, kind person she had always been. "The Sterling Foundation isn't about me or Mr. Sterling," Mary continued. "It's about all the families who are facing scary medical situations right now. It's about giving them hope, practical help, and someone to pray with them if they want that." Victor took the microphone back. "In the past 3 months, the foundation has already helped over 200 families. We've paid medical bills, provided temporary housing for families who have to travel for treatment, and offered counseling services. But most importantly, we've shown people that they're not alone in their darkest hours." Tommy stood up from his seat and walked to the podium. He was still small for his age, but he had grown braver and more confident since his recovery. "Can I say something, Daddy?" Tommy asked. Victor lifted his son up so he could reach the microphone. "Hi everyone," Tommy said, his young voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "I wanted to thank Miss Mary for praying for me, and I wanted to tell you something the voice told me in the hospital." The room was completely silent. Everyone wanted to hear what the miracle boy had to say. "The voice said that miracles happen when people love each other more than they're scared. My daddy was really scared when I was sleeping, but Miss Mary loved me even though she didn't know me, and that love woke me up." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even the toughest reporters were wiping away tears. Tommy continued. "The voice also said that everyone can make miracles happen. You don't have to be special or rich or smart. You just have to care about people and not be afraid to help them." Victor hugged his son tightly. Over the past 3 months, Tommy had shared many more insights from his experience during the coma. Each one had taught Victor something new about faith, love, and what really mattered in life. "One more thing," Tommy said into the microphone. "Daddy and I built the treehouse we talked about, and we made it extra big so that Miss Mary's kids can play in it too, because now we're all family." The crowd erupted in applause. Victor's transformation from skeptical billionaire to faithful philanthropist had captured the imagination of people around the world. After the press conference, Victor, Mary, and Tommy went to lunch at a small restaurant near the hospital. It had become their monthly tradition, a quiet meal together to talk about the foundation's work and catch up on their lives. "Mary," Victor said as they waited for their food, "I've been thinking about something Tommy said during his speech." "What's that?" Mary asked. "He said that miracles happen when people love each other more than they're scared. I think that's what you did for us that night. You chose love over fear." Mary smiled. "I think you did the same thing, Mr. Sterling. When you let me pray for Tommy, even though you didn't believe it would work, you chose hope over despair." Tommy was coloring on his placemat, but he was listening to the adult conversation. "Daddy, do you still not believe in God?" It was a question Victor had been wrestling with for months. "I don't know if I believe the same way Miss Mary does," Victor said honestly, "but I believe in something bigger than myself now. I believe in the power of love and hope and people caring for each other." "The voice said that's all God really wants," Tommy said matter-of-factly. "Just for people to love each other and take care of each other." Their food arrived, and Victor noticed Mary quietly saying a prayer before she ate, like she always did. For the first time, he found himself wanting to join her. "Mary," Victor said, "would you mind if I said grace today?" Mary looked surprised but pleased. "Of course, Mr. Sterling." Victor took Tommy's hand and Mary's hand, and they bowed their heads together. "Thank you," Victor said simply, "for second chances, for healing, for friendship, and for teaching us that miracles are real when we open our hearts to them." "Amen," Mary and Tommy said together. As they ate their lunch, Victor reflected on how much his life had changed. 3 months ago, he had been one of the richest but loneliest men in Chicago. He had had money, power, and success, but he had been missing the most important things: faith, community, and purpose. Now he spent his days helping families in crisis, instead of just making more money. He had dinner with Tommy every night, instead of working late at the office. He had regular conversations with Mary about life, faith, and how to make the world better. Most importantly, he no longer felt like he was facing life's challenges alone. After lunch, they visited Tommy's old hospital room, which had been converted into a family counseling center, funded by the Sterling Foundation. There was a plaque on the wall that read, "In honor of Tommy Sterling and Mary Johnson, proof that miracles happen when faith meets love." As they walked through the hospital corridors, Victor noticed something he had never seen before during those desperate weeks when Tommy was in a coma. He saw families supporting each other, medical staff going beyond their duties to comfort patients, volunteers reading to children, and chaplains offering hope to scared parents. "Mary," Victor said, "were all these people here before? All these acts of kindness and service?" "They were always here, Mr. Sterling," Mary replied. "You just weren't looking for them." Tommy ran ahead of them, stopping to high-five nurses who remembered him and wave at children in wheelchairs. His joy and energy brought smiles to everyone he met. "You know," Victor said, "I used to think that believing in God meant believing in magic. But I think I understand now that faith is really about believing in goodness. Believing that people can care for each other, that love is more powerful than fear, and that even in the darkest times, there's always hope." Mary nodded. "That's the most beautiful definition of faith I've ever heard." As they left the hospital, Victor's phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. The Sterling Foundation had just received a donation from a tech company in California, $1 million from a CEO who had heard Tommy's speech and wanted to help create miracles for other families. "Look at this," Victor showed Mary the message. "It's starting to spread," Mary said with wonder in her voice. "Other people want to help." The voice was right, Tommy said, overhearing their conversation. "When people see miracles happen, they want to make miracles too." That evening, as Victor tucked Tommy into bed in their mansion, the same mansion that had felt so empty and cold just a few months ago, his son asked him a question. "Daddy, are you happy now?" Victor thought about everything that had changed in his life. He thought about the foundation, his friendship with Mary, his new understanding of faith, and most importantly, his healthy, vibrant son. "Yes, buddy," Victor said. "I'm happier than I've ever been." "Good," Tommy said sleepily. "The voice said you would be happy once you learned that love is the only thing that's really real." As Tommy drifted off to sleep, Victor sat in the chair next to his son's bed, not because he was afraid Tommy wouldn't wake up, but because he enjoyed these quiet moments of gratitude. He thought about Mary, probably at home with her own children, saying her nightly prayers. He thought about all the families the foundation would help tomorrow. He thought about the miracles that happened every day when people chose love over fear. And for the second time in his life, Victor Sterling prayed. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness, "for showing me that the most important things in life can't be bought or sold. They can only be given and received with an open heart." Somewhere in the quiet house, Victor could have sworn he heard the gentle sound of someone listening.